Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, June 22nd, 2020. It's a lot of 20s and 2s to have to get through today. All right, we are ready and set for another show. It's a Monday, and the president is awake and confessing to crimes. So we might as well tune in and dig in and find out how he intends to try to steal the election next time and, I guess, foil it. I don't know. I suppose this is his way of projecting his crimes. He's upset this morning that no one realizes the way he does, I guess, that all the foreign adversaries we have to do in order to undermine the integrity of the elections is to print up more and more and more mail-in ballots and simply mark them for his opponent. I presume that's what he figures they're going to do, and mail them in. And we'll never be able to tell the difference between genuine ballots, the way we usually do with absentee balloting, and the fake ones, which is something we are never looking out for because reasons. Hey, I don't know. I suppose it's always possible for someone to try and do this, and I guess this, as usual, means that is what he intends to do. Now, that would be an interesting plan, right? If your intention is to just print up a bunch of ballots and mark them for Trump and then win the election, and then when he wins, despite all odds and despite all the polling, et cetera, and people say, hey, wait a second, something is really wrong here, he'll say, I told you that this was a possibility, but you said it wasn't, and now you have to accept this outcome. I don't know. They've been unable to pull off anything else in any competent fashion, so I don't know that they're really going to be able to do something like that. That doesn't mean they wouldn't try to do it and then get caught out and be really embarrassed, or what should be really embarrassed for anyone else, but he's incapable of feeling that embarrassment. But I'm not 100% sure what we do with that information, and the fact that he's been caught and ordinarily ought to be embarrassed but isn't. I don't know. I guess then it depends on whether or not the people with the guns think that it's enough for him to claim to have won the presidency, and I don't know how that sorts itself out. Well, maybe we'll never get there. Maybe the International Criminal Court will swoop in and grab him up because he also spent the weekend essentially confessing to mass murder of Americans. But don't let it stop there. If you're listening internationally, he's out to get you too. Pandemics don't care whether it's killing just us or everyone else in the world too. And if you take what used to be the world's leading hope, usually in terms of, not only sharing our version, for better or for worse, of democracy around the world, we also very often found that the world was depending on the United States for leadership in the medical field as well. Not that we were the only ones capable of producing those answers, but we're very often the only ones capable of producing those medical answers and distributing them at scale, which is, of course, what you would need to do to rein things in. So, we just hope that they're monitoring things in The Hague and aware of exactly what he's doing. Of course, I'm speaking of his having spent the weekend at his rally in Tulsa, where not that many people showed up. We'll discuss all of that. They didn't wear much in the way of masks, and we'll discuss the implications of that as well. But yes, he very famously spent his time telling everybody that he asked his staff to help him find some ways to slow down testing because he means for everybody to understand it this way. Donald Trump says very pointedly and very honestly, I suppose, he believes that it is testing that causes COVID-19. I don't know why he wants people to believe that he believes that, but he does, just as he wants people to believe that windmills cause cancer and that F-35s are in fact made out of invisible materials, just like Wonder Woman's cartoon, 1970s TV cartoon plane. Not really sure why that happens. And ordinarily, when this happens, they contact the next of kin. They would call Ivanka and say, "You really need to do something about your dad. Have you considered involuntarily committing him to some sort of psychiatric care or elder care at the very least?" And it's a rough period in many people's lives, but that's the way the rest of us live. But now we all have to live under Crazy Town and hope that his stupid experiment with COVID-19 doesn't get out of control for the rest of the world as well, and that they find out too late in order to actually do something about it and bring him to heel the way the rest of the world did with various other insane dictators of the past. Anyway, now for traffic and weather, here's Greg. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
So I'm just waiting for him to say that the pregnancy test caused pregnancy.
Yes.
News at 11.
Sure. I mean, everyone's throwing that out there. I don't know what to tell you, but I mean, again, he paints his face orange and says repeatedly that windmills cause ear cancer. I don't know what to say other than it's all right out there in front of you, and we're all like, "Oh, I don't know, he's just eccentric. He's a maverick. He's rewriting the political rule book."
Well, there's something terribly wrong with him, but he's president, and there's something terribly wrong with our institutions, including the media, because they feel like they have to report this as
Electoral
if it's
college
said
felt
by
they
a
had
sane
to do
person,
that.
and they have to clean it up.
Yeah.
And every time they do that, they make it worse. Because if you do the unfiltered, this is what he said, then the public has a much better idea of the idea that, that he's like not there. However, there's a significant part of the population that understands that completely and still wants to vote for him.
I don't know.
So it's the old argument about whether or not John Bolton should have said what he said at the time of the impeachment. What difference would it make? Because the Senate was going to vote the way they want to vote. And Jerry Nadler's making that very same argument now about impeaching Bill Barr. Why impeach him? It's a waste of time. The Senate's just going to acquit him.
Sure, I remember that one in 2005. We had that fantastic argument, and it worked out well. It worked out well for Jerry Nadler. He's still there, and so is Nancy Pelosi and all the people who said, we don't have the votes. But we're back to that, even though I think they abandoned that. How long ago was that? That was this year. Wow.
But the way that they abandoned
impeachment is
they
less old
had
than COVID-19.
But they had Adam Schiff do an end around and took Nadler out of it.
Yeah.
Now this is Bill Barr and the Justice Department. Not so easy.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, you tell me. You're the process expert. But in the one case, we're looking at impeachment writ large, and tradition is one thing, but saying, it's a national security issue and giving it to Schiff was a relatively easy lift. In this case, we're talking specifically about the Justice Department.
Yeah.
And you'd think that Nadler's committee, of which he's the chair, is like exactly where it should be. How do you find a workaround about that?
You mean to make it a national security issue so that he can take it, or
and give it to Adam Schiff or anybody else, or make it a transportation issue and give it to some other committee chair? I mean, how do you take it out of Nadler's purview? Is what I'm saying.
I don't know. I suppose. Well, one thing I don't know. I don't know what happens if, let's say, Adam Schiff says, "Hey, we're having an impeachment hearing for Bill Barr," and everybody says, "What's your jurisdiction?" And he says, "What's not my jurisdiction? I'm having this hearing." And then what? I don't know. And then I mean, they have internal meetings and argue with him and tell him
the point
he's
is,
in trouble,
Nadler didn't want to impeach Trump, and so Pelosi said, "Fine, I'll put Adam Schiff in charge."
Yeah.
He does.
Okay.
Where are they going to find somebody that wants to impeach Barr? Well, that's easy. It's like everybody else. And where are you going to move it to? And what fig leaf are you going to use to say this is the procedural reason why Nadler's not in charge?
I don't know. How about shut up, Nadler?
You could always do that, but then we'd be
Schiff
Republican.
says he's doing it. Yeah, I guess. But I mean, I don't know what good his jurisdiction does him if he. I mean, so he says, "I'm not going to use my jurisdiction." All right. Well, but Adam Schiff is going to. But he can't because I also didn't. No, not really. He can.
Now, to Nadler's point, pretty much everybody on the GOP side in the Senate said, look, you guys proved your case. It's just that we don't want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that was personal attachment to Trump, and he'll try and transfer that to bar, and it might work and it might not work.
Well, it might not even work for Trump anymore. I mean, he's kind of sinking,
possible.
and so that's why. Did you read the actual tweet that Trump had this morning about
I don't know, which
emails?
The emails.
Mail-in ballots, rather.
Oh, the all capitals one. Yes,
Yeah,
I had
did you
to because
read
it was in all capitals. It's a legal thing. You're supposed to read that, or else you go to federal
I
prison.
thought it was not using your inside voice. But did you read the actual tweet?
Yeah. Then that's when I tweeted to Ivanka. This is
On the air
this is you.
this morning.
You have to do this. Oh, have I read it on the air? No.
Okay.
Gargle.
So it says, rigged 2020 election, millions of mail-in ballots will be printed by foreign countries and others.
Yeah.
It will be
both
the
foreign and
scandal
other.
of our times. That's the tweet he had this morning, an hour ago.
Yes.
Right. Now, Pam Fessler,
And he had breakfast. Yeah.
who's a reporter, correspondent for NPR News, who covers voting issues, had an interview last week with former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, a Republican.
I remember that guy. He's still alive?
Yeah.
Cool.
An interview with me last week
For the
on
Ridge
Trump's
family.
unfounded claims about mail-in voting, very timely. And Ridge said, quote, I think it's very sad and very disappointing that with almost 5 months to go, the president seems to try to delegitimize the November 3rd election. This may be an indication he's more worried about the outcome than he's worried about fraud. Which is the point, of course.
Yeah.
Ridge also said that this could hurt GOP efforts to retain control of the Senate, since many in the party want supporters to vote absentee.
Yes.
GOP
normally,
guys,
yeah.
your voters are like 103 years old on average.
Yeah.
Of course you want them to be able to vote absentee. So trying to get rid of that is hurting you in a lot of different
Yes.
states. And your people know that, and that's why they're not very happy with you right now.
So what now?
Yeah, so what now? So John Harwood writes, why Trump is already sowing doubts about November's vote. Pretty simple. Every congressional leader seeking majority support follows the mantra, when you have the votes, vote.
Yeah.
The sentiment of presidential politics do. And just as a reminder for those of you, sometimes you're looking at, well, why are they bringing it up now? Why won't they bring it up now? How come they don't vote on it today? Why are they voting on it today instead of next week? Well, as soon as in a contentious situation, whoever is the vote counter there, the whip or the majority leader, whoever it is, once they figure out they have the votes, they're going to vote on it. And if they tell you, we have the votes, we're just making some finishing that means they don't have the votes. Because if they did, they'd be voting on it. That's the point of what he's trying to say here.
Yes, unless there's some stupid rule, and there often is.
Well,
why
then
they
change
have to wait
your rule.
until 4
and then you have an
PM or
announcement that
whatever.
you're changing the rule. I mean, they make clear what's going on.
Sometimes you only have to wait a couple hours.
Yeah. But, the idea that we have the votes, we just want to wait till next month. No.
Yes, right. Well, that's different. Okay.
That's why President Donald Trump, writes Harwood, so strongly opposes easing voter procedures in response to fears of coronavirus this fall. Poll after poll makes plain that less than 5 months before Election Day, Trump lacks the support to win a second term. Very fancy way of saying he's losing. Trump's tweets slamming states for encouraging mail-in voting, his legal action to stop them, and his attempts to undermine public confidence with groundless fraud claims show that he knows higher turnout will work against him. So does his resistance to robust federal assistance to assure elections officials can adapt to the challenges the pandemic poses for November. Again, the reason all that's important is that what's going on right now, and the Tulsa rally actually has a lot to do with it, is that Trump is realizing he's losing. That even though they try to keep bad news from him and they try to make up polls to make him feel better, he was confronted with the concept that people may not like him and they won't do everything for him, and he can't have what he wants. So he's having a temper tantrum today and basically saying, if I can't win, I'm going to make sure that you understand that my loss was fixed.
Yes. Well, why didn't he fix it his way?
Because he doesn't fix anything, because he's incompetent, and then he gives it to Jared, who's even more incompetent. So between them, they wind up with something like the Tulsa rally. And plans, by the way, I should say, to go on to Arizona. We'll get to that.
Oh, what a great spot. It's beautiful.
But Bill Kristol says, you look at the polls and think he can't win. I mean, Biden's up by 9 right now nationally. But Trump's path to victory doesn't depend on persuading Americans. It depends on voter suppression, mass disinformation, foreign interference, and unabashed use of executive branch power to shape events and perceptions this fall. And Brian Klaas
Those are some interesting things.
Throws in, this is correct. A cornered wannabe despot, even an erratic and unstrategic one, is dangerous. Protecting the integrity of the process as best we can is paramount. And that's why voting integrity and putting money behind it really has to be in the next coronavirus rescue.
Oh, well.
It has to be. You can't keep kicking it down the road the way they've been doing. The money has to be there.
What if it's not worth it? Or some such excuse. Or we don't have the votes. No? Can't say that?
In the House you ought to.
Yeah,
and
I know.
in the Senate you have to shame them. There's just no other way. Now, that normally doesn't work, but Trump is collapsing in the polls. He's getting trounced. And so now is the time to push that. And remember, as I started out by saying, it's in the GOP's best interest to make sure this works. And that's why you have so many Republican secretaries of state at state level supporting this concept.
I sent those ballots out.
Yeah, for example.
What did I do that for? Yeah, now it's too late now. I have to support counting.
Because it helps me. But let's get back to the Tulsa thing, because that's,
all right.
that really summarizes everything. So, again, to remind people, everybody knows about K-pop stans and TikTok teens by now,
yes.
I hope.
That they exist.
There's this Death Star of a campaign organization run by Brad Parscale, who's collecting data on everybody and using this data to fire up the Trump base. And he's bragging about it and, of course, getting millions of dollars for doing it and then buying the expensive cars. Yes. And so Trump is really mad at him anyway. And he says, no, we're going to have this big rally. It's about time. And there's oodles of stories about Trump needs this. It's all for his ego. He doesn't really care about the fact that Oklahoma has rising coronavirus cases. So we talked about this last week. So what he's going to do, he's going to make everybody not only sign up for this thing, but he's also going to make you sign a disclaimer that says, if I kill you and you die in the service of worshiping me, it's on you.
Okay.
All right. So he has this disclaimer. And so then he says, okay, this is going to be great. I can't wait. I'm all revved up. And people start noticing that, we're not getting the response necessarily that we think we're going to. Oh, by the way, 6 people working on the campaign to do this have gotten coronavirus.
Yeah.
And Trump gets furious.
Including Secret Service.
Yeah, and Trump gets furious that this is news, that this got out, that somebody leaked this.
How dare you? We keep
so
reporting
now they're starting to have doubts about how this is going in their lizard brains. And they say to themselves, you know what? I have an idea. Jared and Don Jr. look at each other and say, let's send Eric. We'll stay home, and we'll send Eric to be the warm-up.
Yeah, there's no real reason why they wouldn't. Unless they, I don't know. Why, Jared seems to think
I know.
he can
Mikey
catch
will
the
try
disease.
it. Mikey will eat anything.
Right. Really? I'll go.
I'll
steal
go.
from my charity.
He goes, and he's the opening act. Okay. And it turns out that not that many people show up. In fact, only 6,200 in a venue that had 19,000. But wait, it gets worse because they had bragged about 1 million people signing up, and they had bragged about having so many people they were going to have an overflow. And Trump was going to address the overflow as well as the regular event. And it turns out there is no overflow because there's nobody there. So they start taking the stage down while Pence is getting ready to talk. And Pence looks at this and says, this isn't good. So he goes in and he addresses the crowd inside and sees that there's practically nobody there. The place is mostly empty. Okay. And so as soon as he's done with his speech, he gets on the plane and leaves. He doesn't even wait for Trump's speech.
Right. Yeah. That was his early sign.
Right.
Well,
and then they're starting to tell Trump on the plane that, a lot of people didn't show up. And he's sort of getting mad. And then he gets furious at whoever leaked the part about his people getting sick.
Yeah.
And then he gets there.
He did the Air Force One flyover.
It's low energy. Nobody's there. And the way that the arena is painted is that the blue seats are the ones up in the balcony. They're the empty ones.
Right.
So the visual is a sea of blue seats with like one guy sitting there.
There were a few people that made their way to those seats.
They put them there so they wouldn't be totally empty.
Oh,
And
I
for
thought they were
everybody
trying to
else,
hide from the
they
virus.
squeezed them all together. You'd think that, okay, if that many people didn't show, maybe you have the chance to do social distancing. But no, for the visual, they squeeze them all together in the bottom. And Trump has to do this shtick, which he does for like an hour and a half. It's really boring. It's not that funny. He has nothing to say about Biden. He has nothing to say about almost anything except a 16-minute rant about why he properly walked down the ramp and how he can drink a glass of water. And, you know, as many people said on Twitter, so I sat in line for 5 days.
Yeah, some people did that. Can you imagine? Right. Not only was it a disappointment, but you could have walked up at the last minute and said, to hell with it, I'll take a ticket, and gotten in just fine. But wow. So they camped out.
Then he's furious, and he's so furious that when he gets off the plane at the end, and then the helicopter and then to the White House, he's disheveled, his tie is undone, he's beaten. It's one of those, after the ball game, or the high roller who lost all his money.
After the spider
And
hole.
so Lincoln Project has already made an ad about that, and it's out this morning, and it's fantastic. I encourage everybody to go see it. But it's a complete and total defeat. And then they're starting to talk about, what happened. I have a lot of these comments that I put together in the pundit roundup. Trump furious about underwhelming crowd at Tulsa rally. Tim Miller writing at the Bulwark, make arenas empty again. In Tulsa, the Trump campaign transitions to farce. John Heinlein writes, there's only one word to describe this performance of Trump's in Tulsa, pathetic. And one conclusion to be drawn, he's finished, and he knows it.
There are probably some other words, though.
And so let me just give you a couple more of these headlines. Washington Post, Trump rallies in red state America and faces a sea of empty blue seats. We talked about that. It's the balcony there. AP, Trump comeback rally features empty seats, staph infections. That's STAFF. And I was fighting with my autocorrect because it kept correcting it to staphylococcal, staph, STAPA.
Only
so
your
he's full of staph infections. New York Times, Trump rally fizzles as attendance falls short of campaign's expectations. CNN, 6 staff and empty seats. How Trump's triumphant return to the campaign trail went from bad to worse. Jonathan Allen at NBC. Trump's deflating Tulsa turnout reveals a deeper problem for him. Nobody wants to go is the deeper problem. We'll get to that too. Politico, Trump campaign blames protesters for disappointing turnout at Tulsa rally. That's where we go next with K-pop stands and TikTok teens. Bloomberg, Trump's Tulsa rally adds to week of warning signs for campaign. So those are the headlines Trump was hoping for. Am I right?
Yeah.
And then you have that picture of him walking off the helicopter just looking totally beat. Jonathan Weiler, political scientist, writes, looks like a pitcher who's walking off the mound after getting shelled.
Yes.
All right. Andrew Feinberg writes, from a Trump campaign staffer, Joe Biden should have to report our costs to the FEC as a contribution to his campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, this was just an awful, terrible, no good performance. There's just no way around it. And so some of the people who are honest about it in the reporting world are saying, he's done. He's finished. He can't win if that's what's going on here. Because what happened? Well, there's a lot of chatter on the internet about the fun part. We're having fun with this. The Korean pop music fans, the idol fans for groups, the K-pop stands. And the TikTok teens got together and said, let's all sign up for these tickets, and then Trump will think we're going, and then we won't. And they did that.
Yeah,
and it's
they did.
But that's not why people didn't show up.
Yeah, so, I mean, you didn't need a ticket to show up, really.
Dylan McLemore, political scientist, writes, how did Trump fail to fill an arena in an ultra-red state? Remember, this was Jared's idea. Go to a red state where people will fill you up. Only 45% of his supporters think rallies are a good idea. 23% have an unfavorable opinion of wearing masks. Tulsa is seeing its highest COVID-19 numbers to date. Not everybody's in a suicide pact with the guy. So you had his own people saying, I don't know if this is worth the risk. I don't want to spend 5 days in a hot zone next to people. And besides, if 1 million people are going to be there, it's terrible.
Right. Yeah. So
and
much
by the way,
worse.
You're asking me to say, you think I'm making this up. You're asking me to write a disclaimer saying that if I die, it's not your fault. Why, you think I'm going to die? So of course it's a failure.
Yes.
It's a huge failure. But why should that change? So now he's going to go to Arizona and talk to some students for Trump. That's a 3,000 person inside venue.
Yeah, but students, they don't get it.
Arizona, hot, air conditioning, you got to be inside, and so on and so forth.
Hot weather kills.
But Arizona is doing terribly in terms of coronavirus. In fact, I have a little graphic up comparing Arizona and Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma, a 14-day trend for COVID positive tests is 261% increasing. Arizona is only 121%. But the COVID positive rate in Arizona is 20.4. We want it to be low. We want it to be like less than 5. Okay? Texas is 10. Oklahoma is 7.5 and rising. It was 4.9 just the other day. Florida is 11.4. Arizona is 20.4. Basically, everybody in Arizona has coronavirus, so that's where Trump wants to go now.
Yeah, only Cutter's got it worse.
Now, what could go wrong?
Coronavirus.
Are they testing his advanced staff there? Does he even have advanced staff? But assuming they do, are they checking it there?
I don't know. They could stop checking. I saw on a tweet this morning that the White House stopped checking. I mean, they're done. They gave up a long time ago. But
they gave up everything. But I'm just saying, so this is all what's going on. Meanwhile, Harry Enton writes, there's no sign of hidden Trump voters if you compare online polls where you don't have to talk to a person versus call-in polls. They give you exactly the same number. Biden's up by 10.
Okay. People are answering their phones again.
Right. So the political picture is just looking awful for Trump, and that's how come he's capitalizing, yelling, typing, tweeting about voter fraud.
Okay.
That's what's going on.
Well, he's got to do something for the morning. So, all right, I guess that explains it. My only question is whether that's also one of his patented projection confessions. Like this, all right, well, maybe I don't need to keep a lid on it anymore. This was our plan. We were going to print up a whole bunch of ballots and stuff the ballot boxes. And if the Democrats complained, we would say, I told you the thing was rigged, but now you agree, but only because you lost. At which point, I don't know what happens. But I don't know. I'm not certain whether it is or it isn't, or he's just blathering as he so often does. But we can examine that in our next segment. There's another one coming after this, which is the real good news. Thanks, Greg. Hold on. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support.
I know some teenagers who signed up for the rally and did that. They're just like chortling, just loving.
All right, welcome back now to the...
This. Go ahead. It's
pretty good.
State of mind me.
We're all going to do it. All right, yeah, we were just discussing about whether, I think everybody by now, I think over the weekend would have heard about, if you went into the weekend not knowing what K-pop was, or for that matter, what a stan was. It's amazing watching the newspapers write about K-pop stans, like as if everybody, has been up to speed on these things. I figured out about K-pop. I learned about K-pop because I had young-ish kids who also were Taekwondo students for many years, and so K-pop was what they played in the studio just to keep the kids busy, like in between classes.
Right. I mean, it's an amalgam of styles, but not to be music critic,
Korean
but it
pop.
really is it's more an idea of teen group idols. It's like, a decade ago we had Leave Britney Alone.
Yes.
Because people on social media would get together and say, I have this person, I'm going to defend them. That was kind of a satire thing anyway. But, the whole idea is I have this group and I love them and I like to talk about them and, I love it when they get the hits and And we talk to each other anyway, and so now it's in politics you have K-Hive, right? I mean, you just have all of these people making these interconnections. At Daily Kos, we have the blog, and we have the conversations there,
right?
And there's Reddit and all the subgroups. It's the same concept here. So everybody talks to each other. Mm-hmm. And so the K-pop stands got together, and a lot of them are younger, and they said, we don't want to have any part of this, and so let's mess with them.
So why not?
So they did. So why not?
Yeah. So there was a raging debate over the late part of the weekend over what did it really all mean, and did they really disrupt the whole thing? And lots of people, so all sorts of nuance around it, but they very clearly made a mess of things. And even if they didn't do it, they got the PR.
So they won.
Yeah.
Okay. As a matter of fact, now that you bring up the whole debate here, I'm going to actually talk about two separate things, which, I think is interesting. Doesn't mean anybody else in the
now
world
that you've said something interesting, be quiet while I do something even better. All right, I can do that. It's good for me.
So, first of all, let me give you Dave Karp.
Oh, yes. Oh, okay.
You remember Dave Karp?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, where is he? Let's see.
Right, he's the one that did the bed bugs and Bret Stevens.
Yes. Okay, now I remember exactly his name. That's familiar. Yes.
Okay. So here's a tweet thread he had about it. Thinking more about the Tulsa TikTok thing. I don't have my copy of Alinsky's Rules for Radicals handy. It's in the office. The office is closed. But it's pretty spectacular about how many boxes this checks in his list of what makes for a good tactic. Paraphrasing.
I'm glad someone read this thing. Yes.
A good tactic stays within your comfort zone while going outside your target's comfort zone. Mm-hmm. Ridicule can be an activist's most powerful weapon.
Oh, my favorite. Yes.
A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag.
True.
A good tactic threatens your target's actual source of power. It's the data mining stuff here.
Yeah, okay.
Because that was their defense over the weekend. Yeah, look bad, but we got all this data mining stuff. Well, data mine me, jerk.
Yeah.
A good tactic should be fun for the people engaging in it. A good tactic should build your capacity for future actions. Like if you talk to each other and get together and do this, then you could do it again.
Yes.
A good tactic should leave your targets and opponents unsure of what you might do next. All that being said, when I teach my classes, Dave Karp, the biggest takeaway in week one is that tactics are moments. They're not monuments. Power comes from long movements and campaigns for justice. It was a brilliant tactic, and we should applaud it, study it, and feel glee, but it's also just one moment. So spare me the hot takes that are tut-tutting the unintended consequences, but also the hot takes that declare social media is good for democracy, or this is the end of the Trump campaign. It was awesome, and it's going to be a slog. What's next? So it was a thing. It worked. One doesn't need to overanalyze it. We were having fun with it. So that's point number one about this. Point number two is something that you and I talk about all the time because I talk about it. And it's the difference between the S journalists and the N analysts. That is to say,
like
the people who look at things and take step by step by step, this is what it means, and let me put it together and synthesize it and get to this wonderful conclusion based on all of the data that I've been analyzing here, but I have to see it. And then the N analysts say, look, I have a gut feeling about what's going on. Let me summarize it for you. I'm going to skip all those steps because you're missing the forest for the trees. Okay? Yes. And so the S reporters are saying, well, why are you saying K-pop stans and TikTok teens are the reason for why people didn't show up? It's obvious that it was older people who were not comfortable with going out in public and, all the reasons that we went into.
Yeah.
And that's true.
It is.
It's absolutely true. But it misses the point of why people are celebrating this.
Okay.
We're having fun with it.
Yes.
Okay? And people are afraid to take the John Heilman, he's finished, he's done. They don't want to say, okay, Trump is going to lose because 2016 PTSD.
Sure. Okay.
So they can do this.
Yeah.
This is something that's harmless. It's not going to hurt because Alinsky's right and Dave Karp is right. It's not a long-term thing. It's a moment. Celebrate the moment. What are you stepping on the moment for? Nobody's saying that this is the end of the Trump campaign because we did this. We're saying that this was fun and they fell for it and ha-ha, and what's next?
Yeah, you owned the conservatives.
You don't need to explain that away by saying, but it wasn't really. It was actually something else.
Okay.
What a waste of time. You're missing the point.
I'll agree with that.
We're totally correct about that. So what? Shut up.
Yeah. All right. No fun in overanalyzing this. And
exactly. So that's where I'm putting those two things together, and that's what I think would happen.
This would be like of now saying K-pop was great, but what are their demands? They
Yes,
don't have any.
but it's really a style that has to do with this, and it's derivative. And
yes, right.
Shut up.
It's distributed K-pop leadership, then you can't nail it down. And
Leave Britney alone.
All right. Yeah, that was it was a pretty exciting outcome, and I think it's fair to say yes. And I also did see some analysis, because you can't leave it alone by just not parsing it and coming up with nuanced analysis about why it actually accomplished something important besides embarrassment. And it did. It screwed up their data.
Dave Karp has the best one. If you saw another one that explained it, great.
Oh, stop it. Yeah, I don't know. I did, but what did I do with it is the real question.
Well, I've just given you some time to go find it.
I'm looking around. And,
but don't tell people
I found
at home that, because it won't,
okay.
It won't make us look professional.
Right. K-pop, please email me what that was. There it is. Okay, I found it. Claire Ryan. Claire Ryan. Who's Claire Ryan? I don't know. Well, I'll tell you what she says about herself. Well, you know what? That doesn't help anything either. All right. She's an author. That much I can tell. But this was an interesting take, I thought. Just saying, I want to talk about the TikTok K-pop stan Let's Troll Trump operation, and specifically about the data gathering aspect of it. And here they have something that they can have a good time with, and concrete, and if you need something concrete. If you've been keeping up with the whole MO of the Trump campaign, Claire says, Cambridge Analytica, micro-targeting of demographics on social media, et cetera, you'll know that gathering people's info in order to shill for donations is a huge revenue stream for them. As far as I know, it was the reason he ran for president in the first place, she says, to campaign, to get donations from the MAGA people, as she calls MAGAs, as many people do, funnel vast lakes of money into his business, et cetera. Like, it was just that simple. It doesn't take much to feed racists the messaging they want to hear and suck money out of them. So, the Russians, the GOP, various other factors, etc., may have caused them to win, which was not in the plan, actually. But anyway, Trump at least knows that firing up the base equals money. So, yes, donations from big Republican donors also equal money. But you have to understand, she says, there was a vast lake of untapped, racist, small donations that Trump plugged a hose into back in 2016. That hose is powered by data. For reference, she goes on to say, in addition to being an author of some type, she says, I'm a senior web development specialist in data processing and analysis, so I sort of know what I'm talking about. Have you ever seen those spammy emails that Trump supporters get asking them for money? We have seen them circulated in screenshots on Twitter. Yeah, they're carefully tuned to get cash out of them. Side note, she says, I also used to work in online advertising. Your regular ad campaign that's pitching, say, I don't know, anything. You pick an item. Workout leggings, she says. It uses a huge amount of data and A/B testing to determine what's effective. It's advertising by statistics. And part of the reason that Facebook is so big is because it isn't, not because it's good, but solely because you can advertise to users based on their biographical details and the likes. Having those signals to determine how likely a person is to buy a product is the stuff of an advertiser's dream. Google works the same way, but to be honest, at least Google's core functionality is useful. Anyway, she goes on and says, the thing about this stuff is that it runs on accurate data. The worst thing about data analysis is when your data is corrupted or inaccurate, and you have no way of filtering it out. It means insights derived from the data set are 100% junk. And the other thing to know, she says, is that Zoomers and millennials, our K-pop stans, etc., are the tech-savvy people, and I would hazard a guess that the vast majority know how internet advertising works. They know about the data tracking, probably not in any detail, but the use of fake social media profiles and fake emails specifically to make advertising data worthless is a thing going back years. So the troll operation in this case, by all accounts, used fake emails and temporary Google Voice phone numbers. You had to give your phone number to sign up. Go to Google Voice, it'll give you a phone number that works once, and that's enough. So, as she goes on to conclude here, you don't know how genius this is. I'll bet a month's salary that some poor database administrator is now staring at a data set of over 1 million ticket reservations that they were going to use to shill for donations and is now feeling sick. Not even just donations. I bet they were planning on using this data to cross-reference against other sources and do additional micro-targeting. We hear about that all the time, right? if they were going to use this to ID moderates to advertise to them, for instance, they now basically know that their data is corrupt and unusable and there's nothing they can do with it. They were banking on bringing in huge amounts of cash and influencing votes by integrating this data, she is saying, into their fantastic, gigantic Death Star database. And now they realize the whole operation and all the money they spent on putting on the actual rally itself, all wasted. The data's no good, and they know there's no way of stopping it from happening at the very next data harvesting opportunity either. I thought that was a pretty good point and worth throwing out there for people.
Well, again, that goes back to Karp's point about Alinsky. They don't know what you're going to do next.
Right. Well, now they do know what
we
they
know
do. They
that
can't
this is
stop
true
it either.
Because Mercedes Schlapp and some other Trumpers were on the Sunday shows trying to explain all this away.
Yeah.
And people like Mike Wallace were asking, or not Mike Wallace, Chris Wallace's son, were asking, what do you make of the fact that nobody showed up and you look like morons?
Yes.
And he didn't phrase it exactly like that, but it came awfully
pretty close.
And that it was a failure and that, you look like jerks. Well, no, it was a complete success because we got all this data.
Yeah. Now
and
we know.
It turns out the data isn't that good. So then, since they said the quiet part out loud, we didn't do it for any other reason except for the data and make the boss happy. But what we want out of it is we don't care who showed up because we got these million things. And then Brad Parscale and others were defending that and saying, no, we know that we were punked, but it's okay. We can use that information to prepare ourselves for next time. And as if it's so easy to take that million, as your author was saying, and just go through it and scrub the nonsense out and then just clone or glom onto the good stuff, and then that's so easy. It's not.
Yeah,
and they're screwed.
Point.
And they know it. And it's just bizarre to say to watch them defend the Death Star.
Yeah.
From teenagers trying to destroy it. We know how that worked out.
Right. Great shot, kids. It was one in a million.
Now, this is a piece in MIT Technology Review from yesterday. Trump's data-hungry invasive app is a voter surveillance tool of extraordinary power. Both presidential campaigns use apps that capture data, but Trump scoops up your identity, your location, and even your phone's Bluetooth functions.
No.
And then they have a screenshot comparing Team Joe and Team Trump in terms of if you sign up with their phone app, what they're getting on you. For example, access requested. Trump phone identity, yes. Team Joe, no. Bluetooth pairing. Trump, yes. Team Joe, no. So the first one is Trump. The second one is Joe.
Yeah.
Read, write, or delete data. Trump, yes. Team Joe, no. I don't know why you'd want that on your phone.
I mean,
identity, find the accounts on the device. Yes, Team Trump, no, Joe. Calendar, yes, Team Trump, no, Joe. So they know where you're going. They know where you're going to go. USB storage, yes, Trump, no, Joe. Device ID and call information. Yes, Trump. No, Joe. You get the idea here?
Yes. There's one or two yeses. Yes, though.
A couple. Receive data from the internet for Joe. Full network access, control vibration, run its startup, and prevent the device from sleeping so you can't turn off the stupid messages. So be very careful when you sign up with one of these phone data apps.
Yeah.
But the Trump one is way more invasive. So they are counting on
just because it can be
as a tool to follow their people. And of course, when you step back, you look at it and say, okay, but if you identify the people that are Trump people and you keep haranguing them, why do they think that's going to make those people love Trump even more? You're talking to, you're preaching to the choir here.
Yes.
How is this helping you get anybody else? And the answer is it's not, because that's not their strategy.
It's like gun sales.
It's a twofold strategy. Get everybody out who can possibly vote for you, on the one hand. And, of course, the bigger strategy from Parscale is, and make money on it.
Yes.
Because they have to pay me to do this, and then I get to sell the database to somebody else, so I get paid twice. It's a great racket, and I hope nobody ever catches on.
Yeah.
And that part about selling the database to somebody else, who cares if it's bogus? That's not my problem.
Oh, right.
I'm giving you a million names.
I'll give it to you at a discount. I heard it was full of garbage.
All right, so
a couple bucks off.
But I'm still making money off of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's where all of that stands. And, does that help him win the election? I don't see how that helps him win the election.
Yeah, it's harder to see, isn't it?
It's
Well,
easy
they could
to
just
see how it's a scam, but it's harder to see how he actually wins the election.
Well, there's a
on it.
lot of people that were dependent on. They were hoping to generate a lot of money from this, and that blew it. And that's going to make a lot of people angry because that's a lot of paychecks for people who have been stealing from Trump, which is a
Right.
good thing to do.
Yeah, and again, yet another different angle on this is the difference between, and we've talked about this in polling and poll questions, okay? It's one thing to collect tons of data, and literally almost anybody could do that.
Yes.
And whether you're looking at polls or whether you're
I'm
looking at this
collecting
kind of
some
data
now.
mining. And it's another thing to have the smarts to know what's the important data, what's the salient stuff. When you're looking
that
at
I
a
don't
poll,
know.
which question really matters?
Yes.
Right? Is it, for example, just to put it simply, Trump maybe has a 3-point lead over Biden over who's better on the economy. For whatever reason, he does.
All right.
Just like Republicans usually have like a 2 or 3-point lead on security or, terrorism. They have kind of a built-in daddy party lead.
Yeah. All right.
They just do.
We've heard
Okay.
that story.
Now, sometimes in this case, Biden happens to lead on some of those other things, but on the economy, he's generally considered to be trailing by a few points. Those same polls that say that give Trump a job approval rating of about 41.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've heard. Yeah.
Those same polls have Biden up by 10.
Right.
Now, which of those is the most important?
The one where Trump is winning.
The
That's
wrong,
what he says.
Yeah, well, that's what
Yeah.
Pascal thinks. That's
Right.
the point, right?
Yes.
The one that has
I
Biden
got
up
it.
by 10 is the important. Well, but the economy, and that's how Trump can win. Well, people already say he's better on the economy, and he's still losing by 10. What part of that are you not getting?
Well, I could ride it to victory, except for the fact that I'm currently riding it to defeat.
So the
I
salient
see.
parts of the data are more important than just collecting the data. So, great. I've got 1 million data points. That's what I'm celebrating. Well, but how many of those are real? And how can you use them? Well, I could use them to sell them to somebody else and make money. Okay, well, if that's your goal, I guess you win.
Okay.
How's that going to help you win the election when the data is no good?
Yeah.
Well, it's not my problem.
Right.
I'm
I
just
got
using
money.
it to sell it to somebody else.
Like, what do I care? Is somebody?
Yeah,
wins?
you're the stupid one, not me.
Yeah. Yeah, but you lost the election. Yeah, but I have money. Oh, well, you do have a point there.
Yeah, for now, until you go to jail. But fine, okay.
Yeah. Right. Oh, true. Okay. Let's have that. All right. Well, that's all fascinating and all. But what about the collapse of the Justice Department over the weekend?
Yeah, well, there's that. And that's still to play out. So some interesting stuff there. Okay, so the collapse of the Justice Department over the weekend.
Yes.
You have Friday night, Bill Barr attempting to fire the Sovereign District of New York's Crown Prince, Jeffrey Berman.
Yes.
And Barr says, "You've resigned." And Berman says, "I haven't. I'm not dead yet."
It's interesting.
The old Monty Python movie.
How do you know I've resigned?
Yeah.
I have.
I'm not dead yet. I
Right.
haven't resigned. And so the Friday night massacre fails.
Yes.
So Saturday,
Another chance. More
another
massacre.
chance at it.
Okay.
Right? And Barr says, okay. So you didn't resign. You're unresigned. Now you're fired.
Yes. He
But I
says
can't
that.
just fire you because Trump has to fire you. And they
Yes.
asked Trump about it, and Trump says, "I have nothing to do with it."
Right. That was a small.
Now he's unfired, so
complication.
nobody knows what's going on. So Barr, and the time sequence here is all muddled together. Barr says, in order to fire you, I have to replace you with your assistant. I can't
Yes.
just get this SEC guy who plays golf with Trump and stick him in there. If you're to be fired, your assistant has to replace you. Those are the rules. So your assistant is going to be a woman named Strauss who's really good at this, probably even better than you are, and she's going to be the acting until we can straighten all this out.
Yeah.
And Berman says, fine. My
Okay.
refusing to go made you
Yeah.
appoint this person as the acting. And now if you want to get rid of the people who are actually investigating Rudy Giuliani and everybody else in Deutsche Bank and all the things that are important, you're going to have to fire her too. So it's got to be a 1-2. It's got to be a two-step. You can't just fire me. You got to fire her too. And now everybody's watching what you're doing. So you can't do it on a Friday night and get away with it. So
All right.
my
Well, maybe.
refusing
We'll
to
see.
go has actually led to a reasonable conclusion, which is the person replacing me is really good at this too. And
Yeah,
so
a
if we
lieutenant.
take it all to court now, it's going to take months and you're screwed.
Well, that's good news. Yeah, and there's a whole other mechanism also. They were wheeling everything and dealing everywhere. And what was I found out at the end of the weekend. I thought we understood this by Saturday. All right, Berman is being forced out because they wanted to put in a loyalist, Clayton.
Yeah, Jay Clayton,
all right.
who's the SEC guy who's never done a prosecution and who plays golf with Trump all the time.
Yeah, right. So what's the difference, right? Who cares whether he knows how to prosecute anybody? Put him in there. He'll protect us and he'll shut down investigations into me, Rudy Giuliani, anybody else in New York. That's what they were hoping for. Berman engineers a way to say, all right, it won't be Clayton, it'll be a lieutenant of mine, a loyal, not loyal to him personally, but, a career person who takes these things seriously. What was interesting was not only you've resigned. No, I haven't. Well, then you're fired. No, I'm not. Well, all right. Then, and I think he ends up saying, all right, well, you're not fired. I mean, or Barr doesn't agree that you're not fired, but he says, the president says you're fired. That's when the president goes off script, and I'm not sure exactly why. And it's not clear to me whether it was, I don't actually know anything at all, or I just, oh my God, you're asking me if I did it. I should deny that I did, because it sounds like the sort of thing I'll be in trouble for if I say yes. So no, that undoes everything. And then they have to spend the rest of the weekend saying, well, we'll get around to firing him soon enough, to which Berman eventually says, well, now that my lieutenant will be taking over for me by operation of law, I resign. So now you can't fire me, even if you do get the president to say I'm fired. But they spent the weekend setting up to fire him by saying, well, we were disappointed in his performance. He was terrible. We were, and we were going to fire him for cause. He's the worst.
Fine, me, the guy who was Rudy Giuliani's law partner.
Right. And so in addition to all
this... You're
this...
firing me because I'm not a loyalist.
Yeah. And then, as it turns out, I found out as well, by the end of the weekend, I found out the original plan was they were going to move... all they really wanted was to have Clayton take this job. They didn't care about smearing Berman as incompetent. They were just going to kick him out regardless. And they were even going to say, not only did you just resign, but did you know you were resigning and moving on to a better job? They were going to promote him inside the Justice Department. Because, as it turns out, the beginning of the weekend, the current head of the Department of Justice Civil Division, the ones that file suit every time, like, for instance, when John Bolton wants to publish his book, the Civil Division is the one that sues to stop him. And the guy who signed the brief, the head of the Civil Division, is Jody Hunt. Jody Hunt used to be Jeff Sessions' chief of staff when Sessions was the Attorney General. And then, as I later found out, or was reminded, it was Jody Hunt's notes and testimony from which Mueller was able to extract the story of Trump saying, oh, they've appointed Mueller as special counsel. This is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm effed. That was Jody Hunt told him Trump said that, which is weird. But beginning of the weekend, the Fredo note goes to Jody Hunt, and Jody Hunt is instructed, you got to resign. And he does. He announces he'll be resigning on July 3rd. Same date, by the way, as the head of the criminal division is being asked to resign. And the Solicitor General also booted out. Everybody's resigning on July 3rd for some reason. Why was Jody Hunt, Sessions' chief of staff, booted? Not exactly sure why, but they have plenty of ammunition for hating him for whatever reason. But the original plan was to
clearing
move
everybody
Berman
out to get the loyalists, and the fact of the matter is, it's now all exposed, and this stuff only works when it's done in the dark of night. It doesn't work in the light of day, and that's why it wound up on Jerry Nadler's committee plate, and that's why Nadler says, I'm already having some whistleblowers in this week to testify. Maybe I should have Berman, but I really want Barr. And by the way, this is terrible, and maybe I'll even ask Trump to testify. But the fact of the matter is, why should we impeach him? It's a waste of time.
That's a very odd conclusion.
And that's that's what led to all of this, and that's how we started our whole session. So you wrapped it up nicely in time for 10 o'clock. And so that's what's going on with the Department of Justice. So let me leave you with Michael Moore, because why not?
Well, why leave, I say, but go ahead.
Michael Moore writing before
Michael Moore.
the Tulsa situation.
Okay.
Claiming Joe Biden's terrible, Joe Biden's going to lose, nobody's listening to me, you have to listen to me. And he's making his case, which he's since deleted, I'm told. I think this was on Facebook, but he writes, they started lining up on Tuesday in Tulsa for Trump's rally today. 100,000 are expected. Trump has lost none of his base. They're more rabid than ever, sleeping on the sidewalk for 5 nights just to get in to see Trump. That's commitment. Don't take Trump for granted. Don't think he can't win. Don't get all cocky telling everybody there's no way he's winning the White House because, frankly, you sound a lot like yourself 4 years ago. If you're once again not taking my warning seriously, I have a question I want you to answer, and I ask you honestly, how many people would line up for 5 days just to hear Joe Biden talk? Of course, it turned out none of that happened the way he portrayed it in Tulsa. But most of the answers to that were, look, dude, I wouldn't line up 10 minutes to listen to Joe Biden talk, but I'd line up a month to vote for him.
Okay. Yeah, that's all it really is necessary, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right.
So again, polls over the weekend saying that most of Trump's supporters do it because they're enthusiastic about him. Most of Biden's supporters are because they fear Trump. Fear makes you vote. That's enough for a lead, and that's where it is.
Okay. I'll take it. I will accept that summary of events. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. What an odd thing. Michael Moore. That's very odd that he can't just. Some people just can't. Like we've said before, can't take yes for an answer. The guy's blowing up. Just let him do it.
Well, he since deleted that because he looked like an idiot because it turned out that the Trump rally was not such a great thing.
Yeah. Well, just
which
don't type
disproved
it in the
his
first
point.
place.
But do you think that data point will make him change his mind? Of course not.
Oh, well, he's
That's
making
his
money.
bit, so that's where he's going with it.
Okay. Well, he's entitled to do so, I suppose, here in America while we still have the freedoms or whatever. But thanks for carrying us all the way to the 10 o'clock hour. An unexpected treat for a Monday. Appreciate it.
Sometimes on Monday you got a lot to summarize.
Yeah,
anyway,
well,
take care, and I'll be
I
back
wouldn't
on
expect
Wednesday.
it.
And we'll do it again.
All
We got
right.
a Elliot Engel primary.
Oh, yes. Right. We'll keep an eye on that. So stay tuned to Daily Kos elections for the returns on Tuesday night. We'll analyze them on Wednesday. And that's what I'm going to look forward to. All right. Thanks.
Right? And
Take
Sarah
care.
Sanders has a new book, and she says John Bolton's mustache was drunk on power. So there's another book I'm going to ignore.
All right. Soaked in beer, that mustache. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Boy, we we kept going right on into the break. And, well, it was a nice conversation. We didn't miss too much. We recapped what we had recapped. But, we'll look forward to Wednesday. I think we might have missed the cutoff as he was reminding everybody on our way out, where we could have cut out that by Wednesday we will have results from the primaries, including those in New York, and some of the contested Democratic primaries include one for Elliot Engel, who's a longtime Democratic representative, but occupying a space in the Democratic Party that is, well, it's certainly increasingly out of step with, let's say, the youngish skewing and AOC affiliated wing of the progressive wing. There's lots of wings involved here of the Democratic Party. And he's sort of an old school. He's very much a foreign policy specialist, and it's always been his interest, and it's been his committee assignment for a long time. And that very frequently will put you out of step with things. But chiefly, probably, honestly, this probably all driven originally by his now perhaps archaic stance on staunch support for Israel through thick and thin. And that may be what's driving a lot of the opposition to him. And he's been there an awful long time. And of course, people are always excited about rooting for new blood, etc. But one of the things about being there a long time is you learn how to stay there for a long time too. So we'll see how this one comes out. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as much as I have enjoyed watching her improve her game politically, has not improved her winning percentage in terms of her endorsements, people that she endorses coming through and actually winning their primaries or their general elections, for that matter, when the time comes for that. But like I said, I've enjoyed seeing her. The politics inside the House of Representatives has evolved enormously, or maybe not even evolved really. It's just sort of developed really nicely, all on its own, and she's found a real groove for herself, oscillating between, as necessary for advancement of her policy interests, oscillating between standing apart in opposition and rebellion to as against the Democratic leadership in the House, and finding opportunities to meld back into the fold when necessary as well. So I think she's been doing a fantastic job with that. Her work in the House has been really great. Her electioneering, which is part and parcel of the same strategy. So I guess overall, the grade is mixed. But her electioneering hasn't been nearly as successful as her policy work and her political work inside the House, which is different from election political work outside the House. It's all been very interesting, and I think I've spent enough time on that in the past, but just reminding you that she's done a remarkably good job giving herself the power to make those endorsements and to make them work well, but she hasn't done a great deal with those endorsements. But what I mean is her establishment of and fundraising for a leadership PAC right off the bat, even though she's only in her first term. It's relatively unusual for people to establish a leadership PAC so early. But if you are, if you style yourself as an outsider to the Democratic leadership, but intend to stay there and hope to exert influence in the future over Democratic leadership or assume a leadership position, this is one of the things you have to do. And despite the fact that there's a lot of rhetoric in her wing of the progressive wing that is critical of PACs in general, I don't know that everyone necessarily understands exactly what they're criticizing or knows all the nuances as between, say, a super PAC and a regular election PAC and a leadership PAC. But I've always argued that the way to, I've explained anyway, that the way to elevate yourself in the leadership game, or to be taken seriously when you criticize leadership and want them to take a different direction, is to rise up that leadership ladder. And the one thing that's always gone hand in hand with rising up that leadership ladder is raising money through a leadership PAC and then using that money to support the candidacies, both as for the electoral candidacies and the leadership candidacies inside the House of, any allies you might be interested in making. And whether they're 100% aligned with you on every policy or not rarely makes a difference when it comes to the way they cast their votes in leadership contests. If you can raise a ton of excess money and hand it out to others who then, essentially owe you a favor when it comes time to vote for leadership positions, that's the way you call those votes in, and that's the way you rise up the leadership ladder. Now, one of the things you have to do, of course, is back contenders who make it to the House. So that has been a problem. That's the weak link in her plan so far. I mean, it's a good plan. You got to win, and sometimes those things work, and sometimes they don't. But and she's not gonna back with money and endorsements back people that she just can't justify the endorsement of, just to have numbers to call upon in leadership elections. It doesn't quite work that way. For instance, you can't just poach people, right? If, let's say you're running, I don't know what job she would be in, if she's interested in running for a leadership position at all. But if there was a chief, deputy whip job open, or something down lower on the ladder, whether she was running for it or she was supporting someone else who ran for it or whatever. You can't, for instance, jump in and give money to support members of the House in their reelection bids who the other candidate has been supporting for much longer. I mean, you can absolutely give them money, and people do try to do that for various reasons. But essentially, in the end, those people, when it comes time to cast their vote in the leadership elections, will say, candidate A has given me $50,000 over 10 years. Candidate B has given me $3,000 once. I think the choice here is obvious. We know, or at least they may or may not. I've never argued that they are absolutely making their choice based on that, but I have pointed out that it is an excellent indicator of what might happen, and it's been as effective as an indicator as anything else. And since you can't get in anybody's head, and very frequently they're very rarely asked the question, and they even more rarely answer the question, who are you voting for in this leadership race and why? So you never really get that information. But the money seems to nail it almost always. So that's all I'm saying. So, what do? You start giving out money like that and just say, I don't know whether it's direct cause and effect. I don't know whether it's indirect. But people who give money to others in their efforts to be reelected, or as challengers usually to an open seat. Now, she's been bolder than most in giving money to people who are challengers for seats that are not open. For instance, this Eliot Engel race. The challenger to Engel, whose name I am not familiar with off the bat because I really haven't been paying attention to Eliot Engel's race at all. Quite honestly, it's not my business, and it's just not been on my radar. So, unfortunately, I've missed out on that, and other people have it off the top of their head. They probably live in New York, or they hate Eliot Engel for whatever reason and just want to see him gone, so they're more familiar with it. It's, but like most, dealing with an incumbent versus a challenger, it's a long shot to be rid of him. A lot of people probably watching the race because they don't like AOC's approach to these things and are looking for more ammunition against her by saying, she's lost again, and are rooting against the challenger. I don't really have feelings on that one way or the other, but I don't know. I find the whole thing kind of interesting. I think she's done a much better job than people give her credit for playing the internal politics, but not great because she's out there betting on low percentage opportunities. But, one or two of them will pay off. She was a low percentage opportunity herself. And I can't see why you would think that she wouldn't be in the business of betting on the same. A few of them will work out, and as they do, she'll be building her power base inside the House of Representatives. If she can survive her own challenge, she's got her own challenge to deal with as well. I don't know. She's just an interesting case, interesting to watch. And I kind of hope she sticks around because I think she's got some communication skills that a lot of people could learn from and could use her example to build power behind a progressive wing or a whatever, an AOC. I don't know what you would call her style of politics beyond progressive. But I think there's a progressive wing, and then I think there's an AOC-oriented progressive wing of that wing, so it's which suggests it's a small wing, and that's probably about right. All right, let's see. We can move on from there to things I do have more prepared information about to share with you. As I was telling Greg, and then of course we realized, hey, we're almost out of time for Greg to wind up and get out the door. I might as well finish that one up. So, with respect to what was happening in the Justice Department, it looked like the plan at the beginning of the weekend was to move Clayton from SEC to U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. That would be facilitated by moving Berman, with whom they were allegedly perfectly happy. They were, at the beginning of the weekend, they were going to move him into Jody Hunt's job at Main Justice down in Washington, D.C. Jody Hunt was asked to resign, and for whatever reason said, sure, fine, I'm out of here. I mean, it's not entirely clear where Jody Hunt's head is in all of this. He's a bit of an enigma. And we don't understand Jeff Sessions right now, right? And he was Jeff Sessions' chief of staff, so we're not going to understand him either. On the one hand, he's the guy who told Mueller that Trump said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm effed." And that's great, and we rub our hands together when we find out that Trump has said things like that, and we thank the person who told Mueller so that Mueller could tell us that Trump said that thing. But then again, that person was Sessions' chief of staff. Then on the other hand, Sessions has been berated constantly by Trump, and Trump declares him to be an enemy and wants him to lose his bid to return to the Senate from down in Alabama. And, I'd love to cause Trump pain, but not enough to root for Jeff Sessions, right? But it's not my call who wins the primary for that. And in the end, I'm going to be rooting for the Democrat to win there anyhow, so what's the difference? But I don't know. It's just a weird situation, and so I can't tell, what kind of person are we talking about with Jody Hunt. Anyway, the point is, it's easy to understand, I guess, why Trump wants Sessions-connected people out of the Department of Justice. But why wait this long at all? It's been a long time. Sessions has been out of power for a long time. Why not purge Hunt at that point? And then again, Hunt is doing, plenty of Trump's bidding, signing the brief in the suit to stop the publication of the Bolton books. It's just, the whole thing is kind of weird and unclear. But they were going to move him out, and they were happy enough at the beginning of the weekend with Berman to recommend that he take Hunt's place at Justice, a promotion from U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Although, it's a promotion from any U.S. Attorney job. If there's any U.S. Attorney position that it's hard to feel like there's a promotion from, unless you're going to Attorney General, it's Southern District of New York, because of all the fun and amazing things that have been happening there in general and historically. But they were going to move him to Jody Hunt's job, which is an assistant attorney general level job. So they were cool with his performance and planned on telling the Senate that he was awesome and that he should be put there. And then by the end of the weekend, they had to go with, I guess we're going to have to trash him as terrible instead, because he did something unexpected in pushing him out of the Southern District of New York. I guess they just thought, like Jody Hunt, Berman too will say, "Oh, you've asked me to resign? Okay." Although they did tell him what was in store for him, which is kind of strange, and he just didn't want to take it because he was afraid, I guess, he was attached to the investigations that were ongoing and really thought, so I guess he's sort of like I don't know, I guess, was he not a secret never Trumper? I don't know. Who knows? There are a lot of people in this game that I can't really read them all that well. They're very odd people, and I guess the emergence of the never Trump faction they're still Republicans, right? So you're happy that they're beating up on Trump, but you can't lose sight of the fact that they're still Republicans and therefore really kind of responsible for a lot of this that's going on. I don't know. It's very interesting. We'll keep an eye on it and see how it falls out at this point, and we'll be, I'm sure, reading an awful lot about the restructuring of the Justice Department all at once. It'll make for an epic saga at some point. So let's see. I mentioned also when Greg was on that the White House, we know, of course, they've given up on managing the pandemic in any way, shape, or form. And you know my opinion on that. I'm not kidding when I say Trump is going to have an enormous number of deaths on his record, and it's just looking an awful lot like he just doesn't care to stop what's going on. There's, as we know, already 120,000 plus dead, and we can argue about whether or not the other excess deaths ought to be counted on that. The numbers keep rolling. Things have slowed a certain amount because the disease has shifted from taking its highest toll on high-density New York and has moved out to the red hinterlands. But by the way, and I think we have mentioned this too, that's a great metaphor unfortunately, there are people who are personally and professionally invested in not getting this metaphor, but it's a great metaphor for the idiots who say things like, look at how red this map is when they color in the states by electoral college, and say, no wonder, Trump won. And how can people say that, that Hillary Clinton really should have been the victor, even though she had, we say she cheated to get those 3 to 5, whatever it is, million votes additional above and beyond those garnered by Trump. It was all an attempted PR coup, but it was all lies. It must have been, because otherwise Trump wouldn't be president. Look at how red the map is. And we always point out to them, the areas you've covered in are, large part of it is empty land. There aren't any voters there. The population, the bulk of the population, which is where numbers come from, are in these blue slivers on the east and west coast. And guess what? There are actually more people in these slivers than the vast middle of the country that you've colored in red. You think land area is impressive and counts for votes, and we think people are the way you should be counting things. And if you count where are there more people, the answer will be over here in these little slivers. And likewise, people who are pointing to, the number of new cases is nationally is slowing down. The number of deaths nationally is slowing down. And the answer is because in those population-rich areas, only the slivers of the country of which are necessary to overpower you in the popular vote. Same thing with the number of COVID cases. Now you've spread it to that vast red area, and this is where the virus is most active. Now, per capita, it's running through you like a scythe, but that's the problem. Well, you guys don't understand per capita. Like, how many people do you have in this state who, and how are they represented per capita in the Electoral College? Same problem. How are they represented per capita in the coronavirus death tolls? You're losing just as much, if not more, by way of, per capita in infections and deaths, but it's still not going to equal anything close to what you were getting out of New York because the population density is so much lower. Anyway, so all of that aside, it's well worth noting on our way to this, we find that the White House has given up on fighting the virus, which is an international problem, not just a domestic problem. We are the United States. Our people travel all over the place. We are have previously anyway, been at the center of the world economy. And when you depress the American economy, you depress the world economy. And when our people travel to your country sick, they will make you sick as well. The virus doesn't know it's left the United States. So it's a small, it's a little problem we call world genocide. And, ordinarily we frown upon these things. So, okay, fine. Donald Trump is America's Pol Pot. Big deal, right? Who cares? He's just going to kill a bunch of us. Well, we'll see whether it spreads, and we'll see whether the international community eventually decides that they need to do something about this guy. And it's a danger to the entire world's population, no matter where they live, that the President of the United States has no interest whatsoever in combating an outbreak of a deadly disease that's going to spread around the planet and already has, and that we're only going to make things worse. And we're only going to spread it more by traveling and sending our goods places with people accompanying them and spreading it around the world and whatever. Anyway, they've given up domestically as well. I've got a lot more to say about that, too. I have a new theory as to, we'll mention this as a quick aside, as to why it is that so many people think the pandemic is over. They really do. I don't know, like we've been saying, it's not. But they're not listening to us. They're listening to what they're perceiving along the way. It occurs to me that during the height of the lockdown in late March into April, and then starting to fade out towards mid-April and into May when people were fighting for reopening, etc., and making a political issue of masking and whether or not we should be reopened, etc. That shifted things, I think, for corporate America, which is, as many people, including people like Michael Moore, are fond of saying, are the real masters of this country, and there is something to that. But what I noticed was, and I have noticed now, is the difference in what it looks like to watch television. One of the chief functions of human beings in quarantine is to sit and watch television and see if they can figure out from there what the hell's going on in the world. That's where a lot of people get a lot of their information. Not only the television shows, but the commercials during the television shows, both were carrying the message, we are in a pandemic. We are all stuck at home. This is the place to be in order to fight the pandemic. And granted that, that was the messaging then. And then there were some people who said, I don't want that to be the message. I want to get out of this lockdown, especially as I live in a place which, although sure, now in June is aflame with COVID-19 infection and likely death as well, and saturated hospitals, etc. But then it wasn't happening. By God, I was filming my hospital and there was nobody in it. And, people said this is not the way really pandemics work. They sort of travel, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. It'll get to you eventually. But they weren't buying into it. And, of course, part of the problem perhaps was we kept saying, well, wait 2 weeks. And they waited 2 weeks, and they waited another 2 weeks, and it wasn't happening. So they figured might as well protest to get out of here. But while Saturday Night Live was having SNL at home, and we were watching celebrities sing into their phones via Zoom, and it was clear that everyone was at home and doing this thing together, and all the commercials said, things as people have been pointing out, now more than ever, in these challenging times, you can have a Mazda or order one of our pizzas. The idea was that everybody was bombarding you with the message of, this is totally different from everything, and we're all at home, and we can, find ways to sell you our product while you're at home. But we were all talking about home, lockdown. And then when there began to be protests, I think in the corporate boardrooms or wherever they're making these sorts of messaging decisions, what else was it that was just recently happening? We had the same thing. Yes, right. It was the AMC theaters right at the end of last week announcing that they were, when they reopened, whenever that's going to be, up to the governors of the states, but when their theaters reopened, they were not going to require masks inside their theaters, which is exactly where you really absolutely need those. But what the hell? But they realized, of course, that there was a whole political message swirling around the masks, that the idiots had successfully politicized things and said, let's not do science, let's do politics around whether or not we should save people's lives from this pandemic. I got a lot of complaints about that, so do you. We are all on the same page for that one. But the point is that the corporate decision makers started to see, their excuse at AMC was, we don't want to get into political controversy. That's why we're not going to require masks. Too late. You've stepped in the political controversy. There's a whole other side to this thing that says, look, we recognize that you're politicizing masks. If you choose the no mask side, you've chosen a side just as clearly as if it had gone the other way. You're not going to save yourself from it. The only reason to opt to go with that side, the anti-mask side, is those guys are crazy and they'll do terrible things to you if you go against them. Whereas we will say, you guys are crazy, and we might not show up to buy your tickets, but we're not going to, threaten to firebomb your theater or anything like that and do it in the name of the Constitution. So maybe it's a calculated gamble. You go with that. Anyway, I think the same thing was perhaps going on in the messaging rooms and corporate boardrooms or wherever they make these decisions for everybody else, Pizza Hut and Mazda as well. As soon as people started to come out and protest and say there's a political movement on, a political reason to say, to hell with it all, let's get out there, let's end the lockdown, science sucks, COVID's a hoax, whatever it is, they started to say, we don't want to be on the wrong side of the politics of this, and we started to see less and less of the overtly lockdown-themed television shows. Of course, that had to do with the end of the television season as well. But commercials, etc. And now they're pretty much back to, we're running our shows, we're running our regular types of commercials. There's less and less evidence on television, where people get their information, that there's a pandemic on. And I think it has fed on itself and built itself up from there. Anyway, just before we run out on the break, I'll tell you where this all came from. The tweet from Monica Alba, NBC News political reporter covering the White House, tweeting this morning, for months during the pandemic, the White House has been doing temperature checks and asking health questions of all journalists entering the grounds, right? Made good sense. But you wondered, well, why are they doing that if they believe, well, now this is the end of it. For some reason, that wasn't the case today, she says. And the tents set up outside the entrance to the White House that the journalists use, the tents normally staffed during business hours for these screenings, are being taken down, like the outdoor stage at the Tulsa rally. There's no use for it anymore. They're just not going to do it. Interesting. So they're really committing to this 100%. Either that or somebody has decided either the whole thing's a hoax after all, or they want the president to get sick from sick journalists coming in, or they know sick journalists won't come. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So that was interesting, finding out that the White House has dismantled the operation for taking temperatures and checking the health status of reporters on the way in. I don't know, maybe they either think the reporters are doing a fine job monitoring their own health, or they're going all in on this whole thing as a hoax, or what. I don't know. Not sure exactly what it is. Meanwhile, I did see floating across the Twitter screen the Hill's write-up of the big primaries coming up, so now I can give you the names of the folks that everybody have got their eyes on. The left, we're told, the left, it says left eyes huge night in New York and Kentucky primaries. I forgot about the Kentucky one, but that's true. The Kentucky Senate race has heated up at the last second on the Democratic primary side. And so we're all supposed to be, all the leftists are the ones eyeing the huge night. It's not a huge night for left eyes. That's not what this is all about, although unless it's metaphorical. Max Greenwood writing this for The Hill, and this way I can at least get the names on the record, because like if you're, putting yourself out there as a candidate, the least I could do is at least say what your name is, even if I can't figure out what the hell's going on in that particular primary. Expectations on the left are rising. Don't do that. They are, though, rising for what could be a huge night of victories, or not at all. We'll see. On Tuesday, in separate primaries in Kentucky and New York. Ready for Kentucky first? In Kentucky, progressives believe State Representative Charles Booker has a strong chance of defeating centrist Amy McGrath, whose name you recognize from her having done this before. But McGrath had been the heavy favorite and has a huge cash advantage. The winner of that primary will be the Democratic nominee against, of course, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. We want him defeated. That probably sets up one of those situations where people say, oh, don't rock the boat. Let's have the person with the name recognition and the cash be the candidate against McConnell, even if there's a more progressive candidate out there. Defeating McConnell is a huge, huge priority. I don't know enough about the dynamics of what's going on in Kentucky, though I can guess what people will say are probably the dynamics of Kentucky. I just don't know if they're right. Ordinarily, in these situations, you find that argument being made. Yes, he's very progressive, and we all would love him, but... And, if there's any shot at taking out McConnell, I don't know at this point, and this late in the Trump administration, with the Trump effect on what's going on and the way people feel about McConnell generally anyway, I don't know whether it will make a difference. But Kentuckians, if you've got a feeling on that one, please feel free to chime in, and we'll tell people what it might be. And then people who disagree with you will yell, and I will read that as well. Meanwhile, in New York, Jamal Bowman, a former middle school principal, can't argue with that, who has won support from some of the progressive movement's biggest names, can you guess who they might be, is now the favorite to unseat Eliot Engel, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee in New York's 16th district. He has been there for a long, long time. Just north of there, in New York's 17th district, a recent poll showed another progressive, Mondaire Jones, if I have the pronunciation of that right, I believe. Jones? Jones could be. You never know, right? Try and be equal about this thing. But I do think it's Mondaire Jones. Opening up a wide lead in the Democratic primary to succeed retiring Representative and also longtime incumbent Nita Lowey. But she's retiring, so open seat there. If you see all three of them win, well, that would really be something. It'll be like lightning struck a house on fire in the middle of an earthquake. I don't know why, but Neil Sroka, S-R-O-K-A, says that. He's the communications director for the Progressive Political Action Committee, Democracy for America. So, I should probably know his name, but, what are you going to do? Anyway, Democracy for America has endorsed Bowman, Jones, and Booker in their respective primaries. So it's not necessarily an AOC thing all by herself, right? There's lots of people active on this front. Polls released last week show all three candidates leading the pack in their races. How about that? So that's what's making it a story. One survey fielded by the progressive think tank Data for Progress showed Bowman opening up a 10-point lead over Engel ahead of the primary, while another poll sponsored by the group found Booker leading McGrath by 8 points in Kentucky. Meanwhile, the Democratic polling firm Public Policy Polling showed Jones with an 11-point advantage over his two closest rivals, Evelyn Farkas and, not Scott Farkas, but Evelyn Farkas. Hey, quiet out there. And Adam Schleifer, I don't know. Why did I even get into this? Trying to read people's names. Schleifer, Schleifer, I'm going to guess. Schleifer sounds too difficult. Now, probably Schleifer. Great. Anyway, taken together, the recent surge in the polls for progressives at a time of nationwide protests against racial injustice and police brutality, have you noticed? Raises the possibility that Tuesday could be one of their best chances of the 2020 election cycle to demonstrate their emerging influence in the Democratic Party. Progressives say, they say a lot of things, like Duffman. Progressives say the mere fact that their candidates are considered competitive in races that would have easily been won by more moderate and establishment-backed candidates a few years ago is a testament to their growing influence in the Democratic Party. All right, sure. The expansion of that influence is perhaps most pronounced in the districts in and around New York City, where those seats are safe, regardless, is I think what they're trying to get at here. If Bowman knocks off Engel in Tuesday's primary, it'll be the second time in 2 years that a longtime Democratic incumbent in New York has been ousted by a younger, more progressive challenger. And here we get around to Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who stunned the political world in 2018 when she defeated House Democratic Caucus Chairman Joe Crowley. That win portended progressive wins in other House districts across the country and prompted an even more aggressive push by liberals to challenge sitting Democrats in 2020. Wins in these races would provide progressives with momentum after experiencing mixed results so far this year. Let's read on. Why not? Marie Newman, a progressive challenger in Illinois, scored one of the biggest wins for the liberal wing of the Democratic Party when she ousted Representative Dan Lipinski. That was a good one. One of the few remaining conservative Democrats in a primary in March. And in Nebraska, Kara Eastman easily won the House primary in the state's 2nd district. Both candidates previously ran for those seats in 2018, so name recognition there helps as well, in the way that Amy McGrath is hoping to use it in Kentucky. But, you do the homework, and it can pay off. However, progressives have come up short in other races this year. Jessica Cisneros, a 26-year-old immigration attorney backed by the progressive group Justice Democrats, that's AOC affiliated, and that's what people typically point to in terms of, those are the ones with the lousy record in terms of picking winners. And, that's what they say. I haven't examined it that closely myself, but I have no reason to doubt them on that one. Okay, so Jessica Cisneros backed by Justice Democrats, lost to incumbent Representative Henry Cuellar in Texas. And another Justice Democrats-backed challenger, Morgan Harper, came up short in her bid to unseat Representative Joyce Beatty in Ohio. Do I have that name pronounced correctly? I never know. I'm pronouncing it like Warren, but maybe it's not. That's not to mention Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's ultimately unsuccessful bids for the Democratic presidential nomination. I don't know that Justice Democrats had much to say on Warren's behalf there, but if you're talking about win percentages, to say it's a mixed bag is kind, said Jonathan Tassini, a progressive strategist and former national surrogate for Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. We've lost a whole lot more than we've won, he added, but of course, getting out there, you don't win them if you don't contest them. So if a few wins only come from contesting a lot of seats, you don't have to have 100% batting average or 1,000 batting average. If you have 100 batting average, you suck. But if you have 1,000, you're doing great. You don't have to have 1,000 to justify getting up to bat everywhere, by the way. Anyway, we've lost a whole lot more than we've won, Tassini added. Assuming Bowman wins or Booker wins, or even if all three of them win, that's a very small percentage. But wins are wins. Tassini blamed progressives, I guess he's upset about this stuff, for too easily falling for candidates who look good on paper in terms of their policy positions, but they're mediocre to poor candidates. I'm in good shape on that one because I never look at their policy positions because they're usually garbage and get trashed shortly after election anyway. But Tuesday's primaries may tell a different story for progressives, Tassini added, so some optimism from him here. Booker and Bowman are, forget about where they are on the spectrum, they're good candidates, he said. I think too often the progressive movement is willing to wrap their arms around people who channel their anger at the establishment, I can understand that, without understanding whether those people can actually run good races and are good candidates. Yeah, all right. Multiple Democratic strategists and operatives have also said that the current political moment can't be ignored in considering the strength of the progressives running in Tuesday's primaries. Bowman and Booker have emerged as powerful voices amid recent protests after the death of George Floyd, while in police custody. Both have appeared at recent demonstrations in their respective states and have seized on the current moment to argue that their opponents are out of touch. Bowman has criticized Engel, for instance, for voting for the 1994 crime bill, not even focusing on Israel here, which has been blamed, of course, for increasing the incarceration rates for black people, for everybody really, but black people most particularly. Meanwhile, Booker has gone after McGrath for her absence from the recent protests in Louisville. He launched an ad last week featuring a clip from a June 1st Democratic debate in which McGrath says that she has not joined the demonstrations and was instead spending her time with her family. They definitely meet the moment and what people are looking for and are speaking very directly and personally to the experiences of folks, said Maria Langholtz, press secretary for the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. You've heard of them, of course. Netroots related folks as well, PCCC, right? Which has endorsed Booker, Bowman, and Jones. They have a long-time investment in the communities where they're running. That's always good. And the people they're running against don't have the best histories, she said, noting that Engel, for example, has been absent from his district for weeks before the primary. Still, some on the left are hedging expectations, downplaying the notion that Tuesday's primaries will be a bellwether for how the progressive movement is faring in 2020. A bit more here. Soroka, the communications director for Democracy for America, said the idea that any one of them could win is a testament to progressive strength. Any one of them, right? But he acknowledged that there are still challenges for progressives in Tuesday's primaries. The ongoing coronavirus pandemic could suppress voter turnout, and establishment-backed candidates have a significant structural and financial advantage as well. There's a reason why the establishment is the establishment, he said, and that's because they've got the power and they've got the money, and that makes it a lot harder for candidates that are willing to buck those forces to win. And I guess I'll wrap it up by saying, and all the more important, that's why it becomes all the more important that if you do win, you, ironically, adopt some of the tactics of the establishment and get out there and to the extent that you are capable of raising dollars in excess of what you need to win again, do so. Bank it, pass it out to others, help them make up the money advantage that establishment-type candidates often have over them. And when they win, they will be grateful to you for your support and, in all likelihood, support you in your bid to shake up the leadership inside the House of Representatives, whether for yourself or on behalf of the group by someone else running for those offices. Very rarely, though, do you see people leverage their leadership pack giving on behalf of someone else, but you never know. They might want to take a non-traditional approach to these things once it becomes their turn, because otherwise they, of course, fall subject to charges of hypocrisy and selling out and going Washington when you do that, even though that's how power is built and wielded. So I anticipate at some point if AOC were to, let's say, climb the leadership ladder by doing this and thereby put herself in a position to influence others inside the Democratic caucus to adopt caucus-wide more progressive positions, there would nonetheless be criticism that she was selling out if she ever, for instance, said, okay, well, on my policy priority, I'm going to push for the most progressive possible position. But on things that are lesser priorities, perhaps, or trade-offs, I might find myself in the job of, let's say, say Chief Deputy Whip, saying, this one is not one of my top priorities, and so I will adopt the leadership position here from, as indicated by the Speaker and those who outrank me, and look to me as Chief Deputy Whip to see how many votes we can get in line for this leadership priority. And they'll say, you've sold out to the establishment leadership. Well, I do have this job, and sometimes it requires me doing things, and where it's in conflict with top priorities for me on principle, I go my way, and where it isn't, I go the way the job indicates. And the fact that I have this job enables me to advocate for those things for which I hold as priorities. But compromise for some people is kind of a dirty word, and it's doesn't usually work all that well in the long run to take that position. All right. Back to what's in pocket and in the Twitter stream, and let's see if we can't find more detail and more fun stories to share with all of you. Let's see. There's been lots of writing, now outdated. I happened to notice the New York Times write-up at the beginning of the weekend about what was going on with the U.S. Attorney situation in New York. Clash over U.S. Attorney who investigated Trump associates sets off crisis. That was Berman. Attorney General William Barr tried to fire the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, Jeffrey Berman, but he is refusing to leave. But now he's no longer refusing to leave because of the situation he was able to engineer by disputing the authority of the Attorney General to fire him. And I think Greg gave a pretty good explanation for that. If there's any confusion still out there, I can't read you the entirety of the New York Times piece, besides which it's now outdated. But that was the beginning of the coverage for the weekend. But essentially it comes down to there was a U.S. attorney who was Senate approved for the Southern District of New York, and he was ousted. That was, it's going back a ways, right? Preet Bharara, right? Ousted, as the president, an incoming president, has the right to do with sitting U.S. attorneys, and frequently is the case. He asks for all of their resignations and generally accepts very many of them, if not all of them. But no Senate-approved replacement so far for the Southern District of New York. And as there's a statutory law that essentially, as I understand it, is the in the absence of the now resigned Senate-approved U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Berman moves into that role as acting, or as I don't remember exactly what Berman's personal history was in the in the career arc, but it also gives the president can name an acting within certain parameters, and I don't know whether it was simply by operation of law that Berman succeeded Bharara, or whether Trump exercised the option to put him in as acting, despite what might otherwise have been the operation of law. But once he names him as acting, the deal is he remains acting until a Senate-approved U.S. attorney is confirmed to replace Barrara, at which point he moves in to that job instead of Berman, unless it is Berman and he is Senate approved. That's an option that's available to the president as well. However, and this is important when you have a president like Trump, who's really quite lazy and has no idea what he's doing or how to do it, there's a provision in law. What if you never get around to it, or the Senate refuses to approve the person you're saying should be the new U.S. attorney? After a certain number of days in the job, filling in as acting U.S. attorney, it becomes the responsibility and the prerogative of the federal court for that district, for the Southern District of New York, to appoint. There's got to be a U.S. attorney. You can't leave that vacant forever. So the court can appoint a U.S. attorney, and that person will then serve. Now, you can then ask for the resignation of that person or fire that person, but then once again, and replace them with an acting, but then the whole thing starts and you have the clock starting all over again. So anyway, Berman, as it turns out, was acceptable enough to the federal court, the court in the Southern District of New York, for them to say, once that time period ran out and Trump did nothing, said, you know what, we're just going to make him permanent in the job, and he's going to be the person until the president gets around to nominating someone else or fires him or whatever. Having been chosen by the court and installed, we now have this is not simply an acting attorney general, and so the attorney general, the acting U.S. attorney. So the attorney general's word is no longer good enough to purge that person from office. Now the president has to fire them, and that's where we had that disagreement over the weekend. The attorney general saying, you're fired, and the U.S. attorney saying, I know how that law operates. I've been appointed by the court now. The attorney general doesn't get to say I'm fired. The president has to say it. Well, he did say it. Oh, yeah? Well, let's ask him. Did you say it? No, I didn't say it, says the president, and now you got a problem. So that's where we sit with that. I happen to also notice that Steve Vladeck had a tweet thread on this situation. And when did he start this tweet thread? Yeah, that would be this morning, around 7 o'clock this morning, saying that the new defense of Barr's conduct over the weekend is that he was just trying to find a job for Jay Clayton, who is at the SEC and I think didn't need one. But anyway, there are at least 3 problems with this effort to whitewash what Barr did and said, all of which suggest that he was indeed acting in bad faith. This is a thread, and I guess the defense here was being put up by idiot Jonathan Turley, whose screen grab of his tweets is included in Steve Vladeck's tweet. Let's see, what's Turley saying here? Which one comes first? Pete Williams just said that multiple sources confirmed that the Berman decision was entirely unrelated to the Trump investigation. Yeah, sure. He said there is no evidence of a connection. Instead, he said it appears to have been done for the reason stated, to find a job for Clayton. Although the information that it was originally their intention to put Berman at Main Justice does sort of argue that they weren't trying necessarily to get Berman out because they didn't trust him. They just wanted Clayton in because I guess they trusted him more. Yet, Turley continues, it is still declared as clearly done in bad faith despite the evidence supporting the reason stated by Barr. What is the evidence? That they were going to also give Berman a new job, I guess. I've been critical in how this was done. However, bad faith is when you reach conclusions without the burden of evidence, says Turley. Well, here's what Vladeck says about that. First, the Clayton story makes no sense because the Senate still uses blue slips for U.S. attorneys. We'll see how long that lasts. There's a 0.0% chance that both Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand would have signed off on confirming someone to that job with zero prosecutorial experience, and Barr knows that. That was something Greg pointed out. He's never done anything, never prosecuted a case. Second, Barr's Friday night statement, in his own words, is an affirmatively misleading statement, leaving aside Carpentino, who I think is is that the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey? Leaving aside Carpentino, more on him in a moment, the statement claimed that Berman was stepping down even though Barr, 1, knew he wasn't, and 2, lacked the power to fire him directly. Sort of interesting as well. Then there's Saturday's letter, Vladeck continues, which 1 says nothing about Carpentino. Friday's statement said Trump appointed him, not that he intended to. So another one of those paperwork problems. Lots of people pointed out to me, yeah, you're always saying, show the paperwork. I never believed Trump without his paperwork. And that's true. That came into play in this situation. Barr kept saying, Barr clearly thinks he's been authorized to speak on behalf of the president. And it may even be the case, I'm still not sure, that the president may very well think he has authorized this. He may even have explicitly said, I authorize you to speak for me. Just say whatever it is you need me to have done has been done. But it doesn't work that way, but Trump doesn't know that. Barr probably does, but he's not counting on anybody saying, prove it. Because that's not something you say to the Attorney General usually. So, Saturday's letter, which 1 says nothing about Carpentino. We haven't even got to him yet. Friday's statement apparently said Trump appointed Carpentino to I don't know what. Not that he intended to do it, but that it had been done. Show me the paper on that. And 2, Saturday's letter claims Trump removed Berman, which the president denied. And 3, it holds out the IG, who Barr has constantly undermined, is the check on all of this. Well, let me continue on with this because we only have a few minutes left. Vladeck goes on to say, I don't know why Barr did this, but the Attorney General ought to turn square corners when taking these kinds of actions. Given the above considerations, I don't see how one can look at Friday's statement and Saturday's letter and conclude that Barr acted above board. Very interesting. And now I just have to, I'll check in on Carpentino and see, do we have these things right here? Craig Carpentino, is that who we're talking about here? Yeah. Currently U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey. And what's going on with him in the news? Carpentino slated to fill in for Berman in the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office. And, wow. All right. Well, I by now I've lost track of who's who and how many people they were moving around inside the New York office to cover for things. So this was 2 days ago. So that may have changed by now. The Justice Department said Jeff Berman was stepped down. That didn't happen. Jay Clayton from SEC was nominated to take on that post. On an interim basis, they were going to have Carpentino from New Jersey take over in New York. And I guess they can do that without the blue slips. But, yeah, so missing in all this, I guess, is once again, this becomes another one of those situations where everyone could have done much better by taking my advice and reporting things as purportedly true. Attorney General Barr purports that the president has nominated Craig Carpentino or named Craig Carpentino to take over on an interim basis in New York when, in fact, he hasn't done it, and that becomes obvious. Your story is still correct, plus the people reading it at the outset know that there's probably something fishy about all of this, and it will turn out not to be true, and then they'll be able to process the news that none of this actually happened, and that Attorney General Barr has been using the presumption among the press and their readers that the Attorney General won't just walk around making crap up as he goes, that when he says the president has done something, the president really has done something, capitalizing on that presumption to just say, whatever I want to do with respect to the Justice Department, I will do, and normally the president will back me on it. But this time he found out what everybody else has learned, that Donald Trump never has anyone's back. That's not something that he does. Very interesting. All right, let's see. We haven't spoken about the court decisions with respect to the case filed by Jody Hunt on his way out the door against John Bolton to block publication of his book. And we'll have to get to that tomorrow. Well, we'll have to get that at some point. Whether or not we get to it tomorrow is an open question, but a very interesting outcome there. Maybe the best possible one. As I understand it, I saw people summarizing the court's decision as saying the book gets published, but Bolton can't keep all the money from the publication of the book. I'm not really sure exactly how that one worked out. So all the good stuff, the juicy stuff that people wanted to use to make Trump angry and uncomfortable, I guess, will leak out bit by bit. And John Bolton won't become rich for his having betrayed the country by not testifying to this information earlier rather than saving it for a book. So we'll get a chance to unravel all of that and all sorts of other stories that we haven't been able to get to. My guess is that a lot of them will come to your attention or be covered by Justice Putnam on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. And we'll cross our fingers and hope that those stories are covered. If not, we'll double back and try and get them. And so will he, as a matter of fact. Here's what he's got in store for you, though. Let's see. Daddy Trump was trolled at his hate rally in Tulsa. You know all about that. And now Daddy's mad. A Tennessee newspaper. Ah, yes, this is one of those very things. A Tennessee newspaper investigating a horrific End of Times ad paid for by an extremist Christian group. I knew I could count on you, Justice, to put that one up at the top of your list. I only wish I had been able to read more of it.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
All right, after losing twice in the Supreme Court, the Trump administration now aims to end the Dreamers immigration program in 6 months. And because of the abject corruption of the GOP Senate impeaching Bill Barr, Nadler says it would be a waste of time. Then around the world for a check-in with Hungary's leading news website and what's going on there in their fight with Viktor Orban.